Hello, hello, my friends. Delighted as always to be back with another episode of Elements of Success. I'm Safriana Luna, the Queer Spirit Guide, your host and guide through this experience of navigating the seasons of life, tuning into the elements, and really designing a life that is authentic to who you are. So, welcome back. As always, a delight. And today we're actually diving into a topic that is I don't know if I want to call it proprietary. It feels very ownershipy and I don't necessarily love that, but it's an idea that came into my mind one morning while I was working with a client in my capacity as a trauma therapist, and it has stuck ever since and actually become a core of my teachings, and that is the concept of trauma north. Welcome, Lisa. Glad you're here live. Uh, Trauma North is all about the spiral path of healing, and I really think makes sense in the scheme of how we learn, grow, and heal as human beings. So I hope you'll walk away today with a lot more self-compassion and understanding about how this shadow light journey of life works. So, again, just in case you don't know me, I'm Safriana Luna, the Queer Spirit Guide. I'm a practicing druid. I'm an international best-selling author, speaker, CEO, transformational mentor. I do what I can to help people in whatever way that they need, and that just looks like me showing up authentically as who I am. So, this program is really taking all of the things I've learned over the years as a therapist, as a spiritual leader, as a mindfulness instructor, as a speaker, all of these things to give you some of the most poignant tools I possibly can. So, just in case you were not able to catch episode 3, I just want to do a really quick refresher on what we went over. So, episode 3 was all about your personal mythology, the stories that have built your foundations. And some of those stories might be factual and some of them might not, right? Some of them might be myths. So we looked at hidden stories and how they can run the show unconsciously and end up shaping your decision making. We talked about how stories impact all 5 layers of our being: mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, and communally. We talked about how our stories are the ground that we stand on in the world, and they really create our foundation for how we approach life. We did a little bit of a grounding practice and really looked at what story we're standing on right now. We looked at some red flags that might indicate we are running off of outdated stories, such as being persistently exhausted, finding ourselves in repeating patterns, which we're going to get into more today. And then, of course, a variety of physical symptoms. I'm very transparent that in my own burnout journey, I hit that point of physical exhaustion, fatigue, and even diagnosable fibromyalgia. So we absolutely can run stories that run us into the ground. I know personally. But we also talked about how stories can be rewritten. The concepts of neuroplasticity and self awareness all help us begin to create something new. So let's talk about Trauma North. Like I said, this is one of those things that it came to me one day. It made so much darn sense. And I have taught it ever since. So, what is Trauma North? Trauma North, if you think about a compass, right? A compass is always going to point north. You are always going to return to the themes, the ideas, the concepts around your original traumatization over and over and over through your life. This is perfectly normal. It happens to all of us. I have yet to meet anybody who has managed to break completely free of trauma north. It is a part of your journey upwards. It is part of what you're here to overcome, to integrate, to shift your relationship with, to be in new relationship with. Trauma North are those themes, those emotional or energetic points that you just keep encountering. And don't worry, I'll give a couple examples today. But this could be a specific memory. It could be a felt sense in the body. It could be a theme that surfaces over and over and over and over again through various time periods, various situations, relationships, etc. And hitting trauma north is not a step backward. In fact, it's just returning to the same point, ideally on a higher level of the spiral, and I'll talk more about that, that lets you know, okay, It's time to pause. It's time to look at what's happening, what's changed within me, so that we can develop a new healing pattern. So each time that we encounter our trauma north, we have more and more tools to get through it. So again, trauma north is just like this focal point. To give just a few examples before we move on. In my early 20s, I could not keep money to save my life. I grew up in poverty and I literally never had money. I didn't really have an allowance. I occasionally would get gift money from a relative or something, a couple bucks here and there, and I would immediately go and spend it. And this pattern definitely pervaded into my 20s, all through my 20s, where it was like I couldn't keep money in savings because I was running that trauma story. Every time I'd return to trauma north, my trauma north being poverty, I would go, oh my gosh, I have to prove I'm not in poverty. Let me do anything else and scramble to try and like fix this and do something different. And I would just run the same patterns. So obviously, being not a billionaire, not a millionaire, I hit this point of like, oh, do I have enough money to cover this bill or to go on this trip or to do this thing I want to do or to buy that outfit I want? We hit those kinds of questions all the time. And in my 20s, I would have had that full-blown trauma response of, oh my gosh, okay, maybe I can't. Well, I should just spend the money right now anyway, because I might not have it later. And sort of that impulsive decision-making process. Now, it's not that I never hit a scenario where I have less money than I would like to have, but my response isn't, oh my gosh, I need to scramble. It's more like, oh, okay, I've overcome this 30 times in my life, more than that probably. I know what to do now. I'm looking back down at this point and I can see that I could make different choices. So I want to really highlight the spiral metaphor for you because we think about cycles, right? Cycling the same circle. It's just a circle. The pattern goes exactly the same over and over and over again. I want you to shift that circle into more of a three-dimensional spiral where it's still circling, but the circles are getting wider and they're moving upward. Okay, that's the spiral that I want you to picture here. So when you first encountered a trauma, the circles are really tight and you're hitting that trauma north over and over and over again because everything is bumping up against the trauma. Over time, maybe you're bumping into the trauma once a day. Over time, you're bumping into the trauma once a week. Over time, you're bumping into the trauma once a month. Over time, you're bumping into it once a year when it happens to coincide on the memory of that particular trauma. That's what I mean by the spiral opening, so that we're getting farther away from hitting that north point on the circle or the north point on the spiral because the circles and the spiral are getting bigger. We are gaining more tools and more awareness so that it doesn't have to be so panic inducing. So life itself is a spiral. It's always moving, right? Day and night come and go, and the seasons come and go, and life keeps on churning. In these circular patterns, how are we expanding into it instead of running the same rodeo over and over again? That's the big question for us. Trauma north, again, is like that specific emotional coordinate that you keep hitting on the journey, right? On the journey upward, you still hit that north point over and over again. You get a little triggered. Things come up from your past. Stories come up. Bodily sensations come up. But as you heal, the circles widen, the spiral opens up so that you're hitting that point less and less frequently. It's not bothering you the same way that it used to be when those circles in that spiral were really tight and it felt more like you were stuck. It's the same theme, but it's a new level. So, right, if you are actually going up on the spiral, it's almost like you're looking back down at all the levels before, all the stories. Literally, I'm picturing a building with a spiral staircase that goes up multiple stories. And also that second meaning of story, all of the stories you've overcome to get to where you are today. And progress is not linear. It's not okay, here was the original trauma. I've gone along the timeline. I'm far, 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 far away from the trauma. It's gone. It's in the distance. No, it's more like now that line is going to circle us back and we're going to go back to that origin point, that trauma north, to encounter it again. Again, there's no shame in this. This is perfectly normal. And I really want to offer to you today how much of a boon it is to see our trauma north in this way. So I've thrown out, poverty for me was a big trauma north because I grew up in poverty. I also had really bad childhood trauma that I'm not going to get into details of today for obvious reasons, but I had a really bad reoccurring childhood trauma that would happen most Saturday mornings, which gave me an anniversary reaction. So on Saturday mornings, whether the trauma was occurring actively or not, my whole body and nervous system would believe that the thing was going to happen imminently, the bad thing was going to happen imminently, and I needed to be braced for the bad thing to come. So anniversary reactions can be like that, where you had a reoccurring trauma, maybe that happened on a particular day of the week, or it corresponded with a particular holiday, or literally you had the worst breakup of your life on March 14th, 2010. And ever since then, every March 14th, you go into panic because you're thinking about that awful breakup, right? Anniversary reactions as trauma norths are usually time sensitive or temporal trauma that's kind of attached to a season, a day of the week, a month, a part of the year, etc. And a lot of people that I've worked with don't recognize that until they hear it from me. I'm like, when did that thing occur? And they're like, oh, it was Saturday mornings. And then I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. There's a pattern that's occurring there. So your system is anchored into this time means this thing. Situational triggers are not necessarily time gated, they're situation gated. So a trauma north might come up. Uh, let's say, you have a really unfortunate history with verbal abuse and you've been, really demeaned and tore down. And now you're starting a new job and there's this new boss who talks like this person who used to tear you down. They might not even be tearing you down. It might be how they talk, their tone of voice, the way you've seen them talk to someone else. But you may have that trauma north be triggered again because it feels situationally, energetically very similar. Could also look at that from a relational pattern. So the same emotional dynamics emerging in different relationships. I'm going to sip my tea here real quick because the hot, truthful tea is that most of us recreate our family dynamics or earlier childhood or formative relationship dynamics in our adulthood intimate partnerships. So I used to think it was like just a stereotype. And then I went into psychology and like actually took a step back and really looked at how people do these things. And yes, we love to recreate relational patterns because we literally have this driving force within us subconsciously to reenact old energetic and emotional wounds to try to have a different end result. And the sad part is we usually don't get a new end result. We just circle in that trauma north and we keep hitting the trauma north over and over again. So the healing out of relational patterns is to completely break those things and go a different way. But that is a very common trauma north point is like, oh, I'm in this relationship and it feels exactly like this other old unhealthy relationship that I was in. This doesn't feel good. Memories surfacing can be a trauma north, right? You don't have to have an outside trigger. There can be an inside trigger, just a memory pops in, your body feels a certain way, and in comes the flood of flashbacks, and it feels really present again. So it's really unfortunate because we have no control over any of this. But when those memories surface and we find ourselves encountering trauma north, we're really feeling those triggers. The only thing we can do is create gentleness and compassion around it. And then the energy signatures, like this also goes with relational and situational, but it's another way to look at it, which is that there's a similar flavor of emotion or dynamic or energy that you recognize from your past. So that could be the boss that is kind of acting the same way. It could be you're working on a project and it's like, oh, wow, this feels exactly like that project from 4 years ago where I got completely screwed over and I'm seeing these dynamics coming back up, and what do I do, right? So ultimately, trauma north is the same emotional neighborhood, but ideally you're visiting from a higher vantage point. And again, I just want to reiterate, there is the really tight circling, and some of us stay there for a very long time, just doing the circle over and over and over again before we ever liberate into a spiral that can open up. So wherever you're at, whether you're circling the pattern with a particular old trauma north, or you're opening up, or you're doing a little bit of both, because there is no just one true trauma north, right? We probably all have dozens of trauma norths, things that trigger us and get us activated. But wherever you're at, the first step is compassion, to acknowledge that you're doing the circle thing and that it's normal and that you are going to hit those triggers again and again and again. I so wish that there was a magic wand I could wave and everybody's triggers would just be gone. They talked about it once, they never have to talk about it again. But that's not how trauma works. Trauma is, it's almost like, you ever remember those old picture screens where you would put a slide in? It would be like a silhouette on a projector screen, like old timey movies, still movies. Well, if you left an image in with the light on for too long, it could literally like sear that image, that silhouette on the projector for forever. It's kind of what trauma's like. It's little residual markers, little shadows that are just there in our system, overlaying at different points. And if we try to erase them and scrub them out and pretend they don't exist, we're going to be very disappointed because there's no way to do that. We can get very close, right? There's amazing therapy tools that can get us very close to where those things don't bother us the same way that they used to. And that when we inevitably do hit our trauma north, it's not that big of a deal. We're like, oh, I know where I'm at. I know how this journey goes. I'm spiraling upwards. Let me look back down and see how far I've come in moving through this, right? That's what I really want to emphasize, is there's no running away from your trauma north. That's where most of us get it wrong and we end up really disappointed. So, once you recognize your trauma points, right, you can start to notice what's underneath them. What are the feelings that are coming with these trauma north points? Normally, it's things like abandonment, feeling powerless, unworthy, feeling like we've been betrayed, rejected, or like we lack safety. Those are the feelings we tend to feel when we are triggered, right? We might feel deeply sad, we might be angry, we might be feeling all these things, but underneath it is, I feel forgotten, I feel left behind. I don't feel like I have any control in this situation. I'm helpless. I do I have any value in this situation? My trust has been broken. I've been rejected and dismissed by people around me. Or I don't feel safe. I don't feel safe physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, etc. I don't feel safe in my community. Any of those underlying things are probably related to a trauma north, a time when you have felt less than, forgotten, scared, ashamed, etc. And again, just like it's a different neighborhood or same neighborhood, but we're looking from a different vantage point, it's the same emotional territory, but different circumstances. And if we open to that spiral, the good news is we can get deeper wisdom every single time. It's not like the end of the world when we hit these trauma points, because we're able to go, oh, well, what's new? What's changed within me? What am I doing differently now? And how am I able to approach this feeling of abandonment or powerlessness or lack of safety in a different and more empowered way? So, in terms of, I've really tried to anchor you into your bodies. We all have multiple bodies: mental body, emotional body, spiritual body, physical body, and then the communal body. So, what might you be noticing in these various states of beingness if you're encountering your trauma north? One is that deja vu feeling of like, I feel like I felt this exact way before. Did I run this show before? Like, have I already been here? That could be a sign that you're repeating those old energetic patterns. A disproportionate reaction, if your response feels bigger than the actual current situation, good chance you are touching on that past material, those past traumas and triggers that are now being brought back up to the surface for you. And you are having a reaction that's appropriate to the past, but not necessarily appropriate to the current situation because you have that overlay on it. And that's where we really want to be able to look back down and go, oh, okay, I've overcome this. It's okay. Not a big deal. Body memory activation, right? So physical sensations. This can be difficulty breathing. It can be an elevated heart rate. It can be depression. It can be anxiety. It can be tension. It can be a sharp pain in the area where a trauma happened in your body. Body memory activation is a surefire sign that we are bumping up against that old stuff. So it's important to pay attention. I really work with parts of myself and I tune into what different pains in my body mean when I start to notice them reoccurring. Literally will ask, like, what does this mean? What's going on there? So when you're having body memory activation, maybe it's paired with physical sensations and an inner voice that's returning you to the source of that trauma in the first place. Just noticing what goes hand in hand. Same relationship dynamics. So if you find yourself in a relationship that's doing the exact same thing the last relationship did, it looks exactly the same, it has that same energetic emotional flavor, you're probably looping in that trauma north. Familiar internal narratives, so mental loops, rumination, cycling the same thought, like all of those can be warning signs that we are cycling that trauma north. And finally, time collapse. So time collapse literally just means that you don't know where you are at in the time continuum. Are you in the past or are you in the present? You might feel confused. This can happen with really bad PTSD and really big trauma occurrences or trauma bubbling up and over, right? Where it feels like you can't react to what's really in front of you because there's just so much big feelings about the core trauma in the first place. So that can really lead to some more challenging symptoms of really feeling disconnected from the present moment. Remember that your body keeps the score. So I love the work, The Body Keeps the Score, the actual book. And definitely recommend it if you want to deep dive into trauma. But at the end of the day, the bottom line is that even if your brain doesn't remember a trauma, your body still does. It's still in your cells. It's still like that imprint, that silhouette that gets seared into the projector. It's still there even if you can't really see it. So chronic stress, anxiety, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, inflammatory diseases are often the body keeping the score and saying we've overdone it in the past, which we probably did because of trauma and pushing because of trauma. And now the body is experiencing collapse. So, my fellow chronic ill warriors out there, I see you, I feel you, I believe you, and it's your body trying to level the equation. So it's really important to like pay attention to our body trying to level the equation in most cases, right? And in many cases there is something physical underlying, but I do often find there's the pair of this lived experience, the trauma, and what the body is experiencing. They seem to go hand in hand. But just as a review, of course, we have the fight, flight, and freeze responses. Fight and flight are highly activated. The energy is mobilized, ready to act, ready to strike. Freeze is collapse. It's like depression. It's paralysis. It's overwhelm. It's I can't do anything right now. I am stuck. Fawning is not, fawning is very interesting because it's a trauma response and it's a trauma north behavior for sure. But the actual methodology of how it comes up in the body seems to be more directly related to trauma response and how we learn to adapt to trauma than strictly a biological response where fight, flight, freeze literally take us out of the brain completely. Fawn seems to have certain parts online. So it's like a little bit more mobilized. but also not. Because fawning is when we completely lose ourselves, we make ourselves small, we overgive, we completely lack boundaries because that's perceived as safer. And when we've experienced a lot of relational trauma, fawning can definitely become a very built-in response that the body remembers. Oh, if I make myself small here and I act nice, I play nice, I won't get hurt. Okay, so it's a very normal, unfortunate response. We shouldn't have to normalize these things, but many of us have been deeply traumatized in relationships and had to survive. And then, of course, collapse is like on the other side of freeze. Collapse is that deep depression where it's like there's just, I'm numb and I'm disconnected from my life and I can't do anything. And when we don't address our trauma norths, we're going to get there eventually. So it's really important that we understand our nervous system and how it works so that we can practice and plan accordingly. Practicing breathing, practicing body scanning, practicing the no tiger twist where we look around the room. All of these are practices that can help us figure out how to like kind of titrate what's going on or even out the nervous system, support ourselves. We can't do that on the fly if we've never practiced. So it's inevitable that we're going to go into fight, flight, freeze, that we're going to fawn or collapse at some point. How do we support ourselves knowing that it's likely to happen because we all circled a trauma north at some point? What can we do to support ourselves in those times? That's what I really want us to think about. So again, I want to reiterate the healing spiral in action. Circles widen over time. The goal, if you're circling really tight, tiny little circles and you're hitting that trauma north, you're hitting your triggers over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, it's not where you want to be. I get that. So the first shift is to begin to see yourself, instead of being stuck on a particular point, into, okay, I'm down here at the bottom of the point, but this is going to open up. It is going to widen with time. And that's okay. I might be in the trauma right now. I might really be actively hitting my trauma north right now. But over time, I can begin to spiral up and out and widen instead of feeling so stuck and like in this. So think about it this way. We initially have our first encounter with the trauma, and it's probably going to be intense, overwhelming. We might feel trapped. We're probably going to feel terrified. We're going to feel all of these trauma responses because we are actively being traumatized or just on the other side of the trauma. That is normal for us to not know what to do with that. It's the first time we've probably encountered the trauma. Then chances are we're going to hit a recognition phase because we're probably going to hit that trauma north again. Even if your trauma was a one-time incident. So let's just go with the example of a car accident. So you had your first encounter, you got in a car accident, you were injured. It was very traumatizing. Yeah, that's all I need to say. Because if you're out there and you've been in an accident, that's probably enough for you to be like, yep, I remember. Right? Either way, if you haven't, you can imagine what it would be like to be in a car accident and that initial encounter to be so scary and for you to walk away, not sure how the heck you're going to ever recover. So with that, even the recognition phase might be getting behind the wheel of a car again and going, okay, I've been here before. There's a chance that this trauma could happen again. Right? So all of this could be a one-time thing or it could be repeated. But that recognition phase is that I've been here before, but I'm not quite ready to change yet. I'm just noticing that this trauma north is here. So if we were to go back to my poverty example, okay, the first encounters with poverty might be in childhood and then a couple of incidents in adulthood where, you didn't have money to get something. And then, oh my gosh, another accident happens. You need to pay for this repair or something in your car breaks down or whatever, and you need to spend the money. Oh, I've been here before. I'm in this pattern of I'm going to lose all my money. What's going to happen there? I'm not quite ready to make a change. Then there's the shifting phase. This is when we're like, okay, maybe I'm ready to change my relationship with this trauma north. Maybe I'm ready to change my relationship with this trigger. I had my first encounter. I've seen and recognized the pattern a few times now. Now maybe I'm ready to change. And this is where we can start to mobilize and take action. And we really start to see that spiral beginning to open, right? Because in the first encounters and the recognition, we're really circling it. We're probably really, really circling it. Shifting is like, oh, okay, maybe we can open up into something else. The integration phase is like, oh, I know this territory. I can get through this. I don't have to re-engage with the pattern. I'm aware that this is a cycle I run. I'm also empowered to break the cycle. So the integration is when we've taken this past trauma doesn't have anything to do with my value as a person. It doesn't run the show. It's an old story. Yeah, I'm going to encounter the pattern over and over again, but it's going to become less and less frequent. And I will be able to stay disengaged from the pattern. I'll use another example. Leaving a really toxic relationship, right? The first time you leave a really toxic relationship, you're probably completely like, oh, I don't even know what just happened. I don't know how to make sense of this. The second time you get into an unhealthy or toxic relationship, you're like, I've been here before. Something is here. Maybe at the end of that relationship or the third relationship that's really not going well, you're like, okay, I'm ready to change here. I'm ready to take action. You know what? I'm leaving this toxic relationship. And then the integration phase might look like someone tries to come into your life that's going to present a toxic relationship again. And you go, I know this territory. I am getting out of here sooner. I'm disengaging. Not for me. The wisdom phase is when we get to that point where we're like, okay, not only did I have the experience, I recognized it, I wasn't ready to change, then I was ready to change, I made the change, I've encountered the problem again and again and again, and I have maintained that I can disengage from the pattern. I can look back down the spiral and go, wow, look at how far you've come. Amazing, awesome. I'm so proud of myself. What if I can now help others navigate this? And this is the stage where we transform that pain into our gifts. Uh, so many people in the coaching world go into coaching because they have overcome a particular thing in their life and they're wanting to help other people navigate that problem themselves. The key is making sure that you've actually integrated and shifted away from the problem and that you're not continuing to cycle it before you go help other people. Because when we're helping other people, we can only really help them as far as we've gone ourselves. So the wisdom phase, we don't have to rush it. Some of us may never turn certain pains into helping others, and that's totally okay. We don't have to make everything into a profitable thing. Not everything has to be productive. Our healing does not have to be on behalf of others. But when we get to that wisdom stage, we might have that choice we want to make to help others. And then the mastery phase is simply like, I come back to the trauma north. I come back to the trauma north every now and then. There it is again. Hello. What are you here to teach me now? I have been working actively on my codependency journey. Oh, like 5 years now, like deep diving my codependency journey. And every single year is some new layer of that for me to peel back. The trauma north is there. I've been abandoned or rejected or made wrong or unworthy when I haven't shown up perfectly in a relationship and given whatever the other person wanted of me. So my trauma north was that, oh, someone's unhappy with me. Oh, someone wants something from me. I've got to give in. I got to do this. I got to do what I don't want to do, up to the point where I'm like, oh, I recognize this pattern. Maybe I don't want to do this. Maybe I can start making a change. Making the change wasn't until 5 years ago for me around the codependency. And now it's the continually returning back to, oh, there's codependency again. Oh, it's showing up in my work. It's showing up in my community relationships. Oh, it's showing up in my intimate partnerships. It's showing up in my relationship with food. It's showing up over here, right? New layers. And that's the mastery piece, is returning to, how does this impact me on that deeper level? How do I continue to refine this? So, talked about Trauma North, and now I want to really sell you on Trauma North. Why should you embrace this? Why not run away from your trauma? Why not avoid it? Why not look the other way? Because every time you encounter that trigger, it is an opportunity for you to go deeper. Every time you encounter it, you have the chance to do a little more healing, a little more healing, a little more healing. You're never going to finish your healing in this lifetime. That is impossible. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it's impossible because we are always going to encounter those trauma norths, and we're always going to be around bullshit situations that re-trigger us. We're not at the stage as a human collective where we have peace on earth, right? Like, look around. So our healing comes in these little incremental ways, and that has a huge ripple effect out into the collective and out into our communities and our family systems. That instead of running away from our triggers and our trauma, we lean in and we go, oh, well, what's here for me to learn and integrate now so that I can go into my next highest level, and then my next highest level, and then my next highest level. Upward spiral, spiraling out, widening. Skill building. So I mentioned you have to practice, you have to plan and practice accordingly. So if you have never ridden a bus in your, or never ridden a bus, never driven a bus in your life, and there is a fire and the only getaway is on a bus and everything's chaos and you need to get on that bus and you need to drive now, you're gonna fail because you've never figured out how to drive the bus while you're calm. So why do you think you're going to figure out how to drive the bus when you're actively in crisis, right? Like, it just doesn't make sense. We have to skill build. Unfortunately, a lot of times skill building comes with pain. It comes with quote unquote failure. It comes with challenge. But we only grow and expand by actually practicing both when we are calm and not triggered, as well as not calm and triggered. So every opportunity comes to us with these trauma norths for us to actually master navigating that territory. Wisdom from a repeated experience, of course, that teaching capacity, the more you learn, the more you can potentially teach someone else. Just remember that everybody else is different than you and they might need a different approach. And then, of course, there's continuing to expand in your nervous system regulation. The more that you encounter a trigger and you go, oh, okay, I stayed safe through that. I was really vulnerable, but I got the help I needed, or I used the tool, the technique, the whatever that I needed. The more that you're building that resilience and you're teaching your system that you've got you will show up for you. You can do this. So again, same emotional territory, but different life circumstances and deeper wisdom each time. You do not have to be afraid of these trauma norths. They are completely and utterly a natural part of being a human being. So how do we begin to expand in the healing, right? Okay. We know we're going to circle to trauma north. We know we're going to hit these triggers. It's the cruddy reality of being human. Again, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but that is our reality. So what do we do with this? Knowing that we're going to get triggered all the way to the day that we die about something from our past that's going to bother us. We're going to wish it went differently. We're going to want a different result. We're going to have, hopefully not a regret, but that memory of, oh, that really was uncomfortable or painful or sad or whatever. And we'll remember those things. And that's a trauma north, that remembering. So how do we get fewer and farther between these triggers, or more time between the full emotional activation and need to integrate and learn and grow again? One, your somatic awareness. I cannot stress enough how much we have missed the physical body and so much healing work. So notice when you get triggered, what's going on in my body. I've circled back to trauma north with my relationship with poverty. I've circled back to trauma north in my relationship with love. I've circled back to my trauma north in relationship to financial planning. What's going on in my body? And what's going on in my body right now versus what was going on in my body in the past. So beginning to just play with now and then in the body. Maybe they feel exactly the same, and you can remind yourself, okay, it feels exactly the same in my brain, in my body, but I'm not in that past situation right now. So then we can move into timeline mapping. How has your relationship to this theme changed or evolved over time? It can be so important to look at that spiral and look back down and go, oh yeah, well, you know what? 3 years ago when I got triggered about this thing, I was a mess. But now that this thing has come back up again for the 15th billionth time, I have a very different response to it. And to be able to see that change in yourself is so important. Resource building, I mentioned that plan and practice. So if you know if you know, you're probably going to hit a trigger. I'll use another personal example. So going and visiting with my biological family, immensely stressful, especially in certain settings, in certain homes and things like that. And for the longest time, I was continuing to do the thing. I was continuing to go visit these family members, and I would notice my body every single time I would get sick. I would get literally physically sick to my stomach while I was there visiting, which would mean, of course, I have to go hide in the bathroom. So, yay, adaptive traumatic strategy for getting away from the trauma trigger. But that clearly wasn't working for me. I was like, I don't want to get sick to my stomach every time I'm in this traumatic situation. So I changed the parameters. I stopped going and putting myself in the traumatic situation, even though it was really hard to then deal with the family members and the things that they had to say. But then I had tools for that. I was able to plan accordingly. Okay, well, I'm going to need some extra social supports around these times. I'm probably going to need some positive connection. I'm going to need to set up boundaries for these encounters when I do have them. And I might need to do some extra physical care to take care of my body around these times because they have this trauma north response, right? So what resources do you need to actually get through the experience in the safest way possible? And really considering where you can just bail out and not do something that you really don't have to do, but you've convinced yourself you have a story that you have to do. Just like I just mentioned, support systems. Who else can help you navigate the trauma north points? Do you have a therapist? Do you have a coach? Do you have a close friend? Do you have a family member who can actually support you in those specific different trauma norths? Because it might be different from trauma to trauma or trigger to trigger. And then finally, meaning making. This is not when you're early on in the trauma journey. Meaning making comes later when you've gotten more towards that integration step and you're recognizing, there's a lot for me to learn from this and maybe someday teach others. But what is the thing that I want to take away from this? What is core to me? I wouldn't be me if I don't bring this back to the elements. So at this stage in the elements of success, we're still in the earth chapter, stories and earth. So just grounding in this spiral journey. Remember that this spiral emulates the seasons. It goes in a flow. So you go in a flow of living your life, living your life, living your life, living your life. And then suddenly there you are on the journey back. You've gotten that trigger. You've hit that trauma north point again. Normal. Consider it like the deep, dark winter. And it's part of that shadow light journey. Perfectly normal. You don't have to fear it. When you can see it as something natural versus unnatural, can begin to maybe soften that relationship. So just remember, the earth is teaching us that things come in these cycles and seasons. There is a natural rhythm to returning to these trigger points. Think about the root systems and how each spiral up actually deepens your foundation. It deepens everything that's beneath where you are in the spiral so that you can look back down the roots of where you came from and see how much you have grown. Seasonal returns, right? We visit the same seasons year round again and again. Trauma north is like you're revisiting again that deep winter, and it's like, what's here in this deep winter as opposed to the last time I was in deep winter? And what's the return here? What's grown, what's changed, what's expanded? Love the idea of soil enrichment. The idea that these past experiences are actually like fertilizer or compost, right? They're the things that we've kind of cast off, the scraps, the things we're not taking into us, but we're allowing it to become fertile soil for new growth, to take a traumatic experience, go through the process of healing as much as we possibly can with it, looking at it, and then turning it into something new. Like that's really an exciting way to reframe it. And then, of course, community support. We know the biodiversity of our ecosystems teaches us of a variety of different things, interconnected, living together, building this life. So we're not meant to be in the spiral alone. When we hit our trauma points, we can look outside for support. So As we begin to wind down our time today, we're going to do a brief meditation here momentarily, but I just want to, again, normalize this for you. This is how we humans do the journey. I don't know why we humans decided to do the journey like this. I wish I had the answer for that. It's really obnoxious sometimes, right? But the spiral is normal. This is how we heal. It's so important for us to recognize our growth and really celebrate all of it. Celebrate every new piece of growth that we make because it is immense, especially when we're facing so many challenges. Trusting our own timing, like we we might not feel like we're ready, but we're usually, our psyche, the universe, some higher calling knows when we're ready for the next layer. And I believe that we're not given anything that we're not yet ready to face. And so when you're ready for that next level of healing, don't be surprised if that trauma north comes back around and says, "Hey, I'm back. Like, let's work on this." Again, you get to collect tools and you get to create meaning in this. That is what's available for you here in these repeated healing opportunities. So let's just take a little moment here to land. You can follow along with me right here, right now, if you want. You can always come back to this practice later. But I just want to invite you to be here in this moment. Eyes can be opened or closed. And we're just going to sit with where you're at here in your life right now. We're going to come into this present moment. First, just by breathing. Inhale deeply, calling yourself home. Let the exhale be passive and just relax you. Inhale, calling yourself home. Exhale, just letting go. One more nice deep inhale, perhaps the deepest of your day. Calling yourself back home, letting go. And as you land here in this present moment, I invite you gently, without judgment, without force, to just ask, what pattern have you been cycling in your life recently? What pattern have you felt like you're spinning in or stuck in recently? Maybe there's three parts to this pattern. Something happens, you react to that something that happens, and then you're upset with yourself for how you've reacted. You wish you did something differently. Then that thing happens, you respond, and you're upset again. Maybe there's more to it than this, but just gently observing what has been stuck. Have there been any particular triggers or traumas that have come up recently that you're gently aware of now? And then gently taking stock, maybe looking back in time to how you used to approach this current problem, maybe times when you were even more stuck feeling than you are now. And just notice whether it feels vast and large or microscopic, what the difference is between then and now in your perspective of this issue. If absolutely nothing else, you're aware of the issue now in a way you've never been before. You're looking at it in a way that maybe you never have before. And that is progress. That's worth celebrating. And now, an invitation to move forward in time and see yourself upwards on the spiral. You've, of course, hit this trauma north, this tension point again, but you've learned more from it. You've integrated more from it. And this future you, while they'll still encounter trauma north again, has a different, more lackadaisical or relaxed feeling about this problem that you have now. And just notice what it's like for this future you to have a little more ease around this problem, more ease around this stuckness. And just breathing in any positive resource that's come from this. Maybe you can sense into relaxation in your future self's shoulders. Maybe you can physically relax the jaw. Just breathing in, calling home, integrating this future you where this current issue is not quite so spinny. You're not quite so impacted by it. And then as you breathe, calling yourself fully back home, collecting both past and future you into the present where you are on your spiraling journey. Breathing, being. And if your eyes are closed, you can gently blink them open in your own time. And we'll go ahead and do our little no tiger twist where we look up, off to the right, down and around, looking, twisting behind us, sweeping back over to the left, looking down and up, back behind us. And then coming back to center. Remember that the no tiger twist is the quickest, easiest way to reset your nervous system to come back into the present moment. Practice. So my invitation there was to really look at a point. This is another way to approach it if you want to do more of a journaling activity. So you can literally draw a spiral on your paper. Just make sure that it's nice and open and big. And in the middle of your paper, you can write kind of like what you're stuck on. What's your pattern? What's the theme that's coming up? Maybe you're not feeling safe, you're feeling abandoned. And then going around and inside the middle of the spiral, really tracking your growth, maybe a couple of points. So, 1 year ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, how you've handled this pattern differently over time, all the way out to the exit of your spiral, where near the end, you might write where you want to go next. So, what pattern are you calling in instead? How do you want to approach it differently? And then, of course, honoring where you're at, taking a breath and appreciating yourself for showing up to do this immense work. So, I always like to give you multiple ideas for how you can approach this. Some people love that going within and breathing and being with and envisioning. You could envision yourself on the spiral, looking up and looking down and seeing where you've come from and where you can go. Or you can do it in a more tangible, journaled way. Whatever way feels right for you is what's most important, whatever is going to mobilize you to keep moving on that upward trajectory. As we wind and wrap our time today, I really just want to reiterate and highlight the most important things, which is that, again, encountering your trauma north, getting triggered is not evidence that you're not healing. It's not saying, oh my gosh, you failed, you're getting triggered again. It is literally just proof that you're ready to look at it again, that you're ready to maybe integrate it at the next level. Because each time that you encounter these points on the spiral, each time you hit trauma north, you are hitting that familiar emotional territory, but you bring more time and experience and wisdom and tools and compassion under your belt. So you're able to approach it in a different way. And you're not going in circles, you're spiraling up. Remember, as soon as you've As soon as you've mobilized from just being in the trauma and being in the trigger to, oh, I'm aware that this is here, you're already beginning to move it out of that flat circle into the potential of that upward spiral. And that is immense. That's where we find this life mobilization and ability to begin to shift. So as you move forward, this week I invite you to consider, what emotional territory have you found yourself in lately? What have you been revisiting? Have there been any particular trauma triggers that have been coming up for you to look at? How has your relationship to this theme or the story or the situation changed over time? Maybe you look at that in meditation. Maybe you look at that in more of that written journal where you draw your spiral. And what tools and wisdom have you gained from this experience? Again, we all have our traumas. We all have our triggers. There's no morally superior person who has gotten to this point without a little damage along the way, right? We're all a little bit bruised and bumped from living in this life. And some of us have very acute traumas. Some of us have had ongoing traumas. All of us are going to hit our trauma north again and again and again throughout our life in various situations at various speeds and paces, right? Might be that rapidly you're hitting it every day. It might be you circle back to it once every 7 years. But you will at some point have these memories that will come up, and how you approach them, whether you're kind and compassionate and accept it as a part of the journey and the dance, that you're going to return to your deep winter, you're going to hit the quote unquote rock bottom shadow, you're going to circle back to that trigger. The more you can accept that, the easier your life is going to be. Promise. Can promise. The less that you see triggers as these things to avoid and run away from, the less you see your trauma as something that you have to fix right now and it's going to be a one and done fix, the happier you're going to be, because it's inevitable that you'll hit these points. So I hope this has created some capacity for compassion in yourself around these trauma points and other people's trauma points too, right? Because everybody else is out there circling their own spirals and slipping and sliding up and down on where they're at. And the best we can do is be compassionate with one another. So last but not least, I just want to give you a heads up about where we're going next. On the next episode, we will be exploring uprooting our limiting beliefs, the physical impact that limiting beliefs have in the body, the techniques for identifying our disempowered stories, really starting to look at the specific stories that are keeping our healing spiral tight, right? Keeping us looping that circle again and again. Some common earth disconnection narratives from modern society. And then, of course, some more earth-based techniques. So you can look forward to all of that in episode 5. If there are ever any follow-up questions you have or topics you would like to see me cover, please feel free, because I have my curriculum outlined, but I'm always happy to make sure that I'm answering your questions, your needs for tools, and all of that. So you know where to reach me, guide@safriana.com, or wherever you are watching this. And so glad that this information was useful. Comment here, great info. The spiral image is brilliant. Really going through it right now, hoping to tune in more regularly. You're so welcome. Yeah, it's the more that we lean in and we look and we go, oh, right, this is just my trauma north. Oh, right, it's my little traumatized inner self's compass pointing towards, this is the thing we want to avoid. What if we don't avoid it and we just go, oh, yeah, this is here. What do we need? What are we learning next? Where are we going next? Here we are to learn, to integrate, to grow. So as always, it's a delight to be here with you. And until next time, I'm Safriana Luna, the Queer Spirit Guide. I see you. I believe you. I love you. I'm cheering you on. Until next time, my friends. Bye for now.